Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries, and I am the magnificent MagMongoSlade, and we're going to talk about Raw on Netflix, the launch show from January the 6th, 2024. Ought to be an interesting conversation. We're going to take our time with this one. We're not going to rush through it. We're going to talk about the presentation. We're going to talk about the show. We're going to talk, of course, give my thoughts on the matches and what happened on the show. But I'm going to need to remember to do this. I want to talk about what I think is a big problem. There's a couple of big problems I think we have here. One of the big problems we have is WWE is a company with an extensive history that they almost cannot use and cannot mention because it involves Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon. And how are you going to celebrate all things WWE without Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon? I mean, just good luck, right? So we're going to talk about that. We also want to talk about, in a continuance of the last video I recorded, which was about not focusing on young talent. It was haranguing AEW. WWE has the exact same problem. And this Netflix show really showed how very little WWE has decided to focus on their young talent. That was one of the things that I walked away with. Is if you are a lapsed fan, you got all the guys that you probably saw when you were a teenager watching wrestling. And let's say you've been lapsed for 20 years. You ain't watched wrestling since 1999. Do you know who Triple H and The Rock is? Okay, maybe you heard the name John Cena. You know who Hulk Hogan is. Or maybe your opinion of Hulk Hogan has changed, but you know who Hulk Hogan is. But so many of these other guys, ifs and buts. Maybe you've seen them on TikTok, maybe you haven't. But if you've been watching this stuff every week, and then you know everybody who's on the show pretty much, but you also know this was a prime opportunity to introduce new talent onto the program and get them on the radar of the audience. And they completely decided not to do that. They only decided to push one new talent. And she's not really even a new talent. I spoiled it because I said she. So let's talk about the presentation first. Absolutely A+ aesthetics. You know, the video package, the opening, where they talked about the eternal battle of good and evil. You know, the story of WWE. You know, the painted mat. That was tremendous. I didn't like that they didn't go into a lot of history. But again, we're talking about a company here who can't mention Vince McMahon. So, what are you going to do? Right? That was a problem. I also didn't like that they exposed the business using terms like babyface and heel and all that kind of stuff, but whatever. Well, Triple H opens, with the big grand opening to show the ring with the black mat and the white ropes. Everything's black. It looks crisp, but everything's black. It's lacking in color. It's not vibrant enough. The WWE is, somebody called it the Disney of pro wrestling, which it absolutely is. And with that Disney label comes a certain level of magic, comes a certain level of color, comes a certain level of vibrance. And you don't really get that from Raw because it's so dark. Everything's black and then the ropes are white. The barricades are black. Like Raw has always been the red show, and now they're making it the black show. Okay, whatever. Triple H doesn't really have much to say except, welcome to the Netflix era, and then there's fireworks and all that. Again, the video packages were fantastic. The camera work was tremendous. The sound was great. My only problem with Netflix and with the streaming service concept, it's similar to the pay-per-views where everybody is getting a different experience. And I think this is one of the things that they think is a draw for the Netflix era, is while you're getting commercials for Snickers or whatever, somebody else is getting a promo that's being shown while you're getting commercials, for whatever. Someone else is getting a video package explaining the storyline to them. If they're a lapsed fan, which is good if you're a lapsed fan. You get to see the video package of Solo Sikoa and Roman Reigns, or Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. But if you're just, a regular person watching Netflix and you don't get that video package, then what? You're expected to watch this match cold? I mean, come on. There's things that I think is problematic, and I think people not getting the same experience from watching the show to be able to see the show the same way as other people see the show. It kind of defeats the element of bringing everybody together to watch the show, because now certain people get parts of the show that other people don't get. So either we all go to commercial at once, or there are no commercials. I don't like the idea of, well, you have a higher tier so you get a bunch of vignettes and all this kind of stuff. To me, that changes the viewing experience, especially for people who are just casual viewers, who are just trying to watch this show because they maybe have seen wrestling or haven't seen it in a few years, and they heard John Cena was going to be on here. I'm talking about different generations now, because of course you got The Rock and Triple H and Undertaker and all those guys, but you also have the John Cena crowd is going to be here, and the CM Punk crowd is going to be showing up. So I think everybody should have the same experience. Now, that's probably like the only time you'll hear me say that everybody should have the same experience. But it's like it makes people really appreciate the program. And I think that if you shortchange certain people, you never know, you might be losing fans by doing that. But anyway, I think it was absolutely A+ presentation. Everything looked great. The building looked fantastic. The crowd was shot perfectly. Everything looked great. They had the celebrities were there. They made sure to shove a camera in every celebrity's face. Okay, Travis Scott was there smoking weed. All right, okay, it's a new day, I guess you could say. Which is typical. It's California, so I mean they doing their thing. I'm pretty sure nobody cares about Travis Scott smoking a little weed on Raw, outside of maybe Randy Orton, who probably be like, me next. So you got A+ aesthetics, the presentation, they knocked it out of the park. Where I think things started to go off the rails was when it took 15 minutes for The Rock to talk. He came out, he didn't even bother to shave, his beard was gray. Talked about his dad, and I like the story that he told where he says, during his dad's time, you could only watch WWE if you bought a ticket, or if you got up on Saturday morning and watched it. Because that's how it was for me. And I always enjoyed wrestling a lot more when it was a Saturday morning cartoon than when it is this huge, massive, clean, yet somewhat heartless, lacking in magic thing that it has been for the last maybe 4 or 5 years. The thing is, I get a reputation for being one of these smarks, quote unquote, where I hate everything. It's like, I don't hate everything. I hate what I've seen the last 4 or 5 years, because I'm looking at this and I'm not seeing that it's a program that enjoys the magic of pro wrestling, the moments that people remember when they were kids, where you get the idea, because to me, that's what wrestling is kind of for, You remember most of the stuff that happened when you were a kid. When you becoming an adult, you get a little bit jaded. And you see that even in the Jim Cornettes, where he talked, at nauseum about stuff that he saw as a kid, that maybe if he saw it today, he would probably cringe at it. But he saw it as a kid and he was very excited about it. And now that he's in his 60s, he's been watching this stuff and worked in the business for 40 or 50 years. It's not that impressive anymore. He's not going to sit through an entire match that he don't want to. And I kind of feel the same way. Like, I've been watching wrestling since 1990. Sometimes I don't want to sit through an entire match, especially if I already know what the outcome is going to be, or if I don't care about the people involved. I am not the right audience for you to play to. I've had my memories. I've had my chance. I'm still going along for the ride because I still do like the presentation, and I want to see other people develop. And I do enjoy watching other people have their moments. Like, I really enjoy when I see young people talk about how much they love John Cena. Now, I don't necessarily have to like John Cena, but knowing that these people really enjoy John Cena and this particular moment or whatever was part of their childhood, that's very special. Just as an aside, a couple of years back, maybe about 10, 15 years back, when Brock Lesnar had his return, he had his match with John Cena. And let me tell you, there was a couple of kids that my mom used to babysit. And I didn't know what else to do with them because I don't got no kids. So I just put that match on. And they wanted to watch that match every single time I showed up. They wanted to watch Brock Lesnar versus John Cena. There was something about it to them that was magical. All right? It was one of the first times they had seen somebody much bigger than John Cena. You know, that John Cena was in so much danger. It's for them, it was a moment. And we're talking about 5 or 6 years old. All right? And sometimes I would trick them, and I would put on the previous John Cena versus Brock Lesnar match from, what was this, like, it was like Unforgiven or whatever pay-per-view that was from the Ruthless Aggression era. The one that John Cena lost. That's because I was tired of watching the the Extreme Rules match. But that's what wrestling should be about, as far as I'm concerned. It should be about making moments, making new fans. That's what it should be about, not catering directly to me. If I say that WWE is the Disney of pro wrestling, I mean, I don't think WWE adults should exist. I think you should be fans, but I don't think you should be super fans. I don't think you should be absolutely head over heels nut job for WWE. It's just as cringe to be a WWE adult as it is to be a Disney adult. Now, it's not nearly as bad, because Disney adults, I think they should be on a watch list. But if you're like a WWE adult, you're cringe. You're cringe. It's fine for you to continue to follow the product. It's fine for you to continue to go and watch The Lion King or see the new Aladdin or whatever the hell Disney is doing. But also recognize that they should be trying to create a new audience. Just like your generation had a Little Mermaid and all that kind of stuff, this new generation wants to have Moana. I get it. And you might not like Moana. All right, fine. But there should still be a link between the two. Something that bridges the generations. And that's what WWE and Disney are all about, is bridging those generations between people from 40 years ago, you know, who have their own fond memories of going to see The Lion King in the theaters. The people who saw Toy Story for the first time. And the people who are going to see whatever Disney movies that are making today. Because then they can share. They have the generational ability to share where, hey, you know, you guys really like Moana and blah, 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 blah. Watch Mulan. Watch this, watch that, because it's a little bit different. But Disney has lost its heart. It has lost its soul. And I'm certainly feeling like WWE is also going to lose its soul. Now, The Rock, he comes out, he puts over Netflix, he puts over Endeavor, he actually puts over Cody, he puts over Roman. Him and Cody are hugging and joking and laughing and stuff. Then he starts kind of going into his storyline stuff, even though it's not. Like, the storyline stuff has kind of been paused. Because even later on in the show, he meets Cody again and they shake hands and everything. It's like, okay, you beating him bloody around this time last year. It's kind of like all been forgiven and it's all over, because it's all about self-congratulations. Hey, let's talk about how much, you know, how many tickets we sold and this great partnership with Netflix. And it's like, if you forgot, we're telling a story here, right? The Rock is a character in this story. He shouldn't be. I get it. He's out there because Vince can't be out there, right? That's the reason why him and Triple H are doing this thing, because Vince can't do it. So somebody's got to. So who's a goodwill ambassador? It can't be Hulk Hogan. Can't be Vince McMahon. It wouldn't be right. Stone Cold Steve Austin won't even show up. So I guess it has to be The Rock. But The Rock has been working heel on TV. Okay, so we're just gonna pause it. We're just gonna pause it so that The Rock can come out there and acknowledge Cody, put over Cody, shake his hand. I come in peace. And it's like, okay, whatever. Then he starts talking about his mana, spirit warrior, whatever the fuck, avatar stuff he was talking about, this Samoan shit I don't understand. And then we get to the tribal combat match. And this match was incredibly overbooked. They tried to put way too much into this match. They did pretty much the same format from WrestleMania 40. You know, with the Bloodline interferes, and then Solo gets some surprise help in the way of Kevin Owens. Now, in terms of the match itself, it was fine. You know, there's a lot of chair shots, a lot of Uranagis, Uranagi on the desk and Uranagi on the chairs. Solo Sikoa got powerbombed through a table. I don't know, could Roman not powerbomb Solo on his own? Like he needed to use the second rope? Very weird. But, of course, they did the OG bloodline and the current bloodline, converging and battling. And then once everybody has fought off, after the Netflix audience get their taste of Jacob Fatu, who slipped a little bit on that table. Good thing he caught himself, he didn't fall down. Kevin Owens shows up. And he gives Roman Reigns a stunner, which I thought was a great spot, to be quite honest. Because Kevin Owens is a guy who's in the middle of something here. He was just on network television working in the main event, and he wasn't going to be featured on this show at all. Him having a spot in this show was good, and I actually liked that element. It was a surprise. Cody Rhodes, of course, came out there and fought him off. And this leads to the big finish, where Roman spears Solo twice, gets the pin, he wins. That's it. He speared Solo Sikoa like 4 or 5 times during this match. I think it was 3 spears to win the match. Match was fine. I think it was too many run-ins, too reminiscent, too reliant on WrestleMania 40. Pace was a little slow, but that's typical of Roman Reigns matches now. But the crowd was incredibly hot. And that's really all that's needed, is the crowd got what they wanted, which is the death of Solo Sikoa as a upper mid-card act. He's dead. Roman Reigns was about to receive the Ulafala from Paul Heyman when The Rock came in the ring, told Paul to give it to him. Paul gives the Ulafala to The Rock, who then presents it to Roman. And then he locks hands with Roman Reigns and it lets Roman celebrate. Everybody is sitting back waiting for The Rock to turn, waiting for The Rock to attack him, and it doesn't happen. Now that leads to some level of disappointment, because this is the moment everybody's been waiting for. We've been waiting for The Rock to take out Roman Reigns. At the same time, though, Roman Reigns just finished this part of the story. Now that this part of the story is over, he does need to kind of soak it in. All right. So later on in the show, they decided they're going to have Roman's coronation or whatever on January the 27th. So I'm guessing that's in almost 3 weeks. So perhaps they're going to do the big attack there. I do believe that The Rock will turn. The Rock will attack Roman Reigns. And I do believe it will happen probably around January 27th, which is closer to the Royal Rumble and a big push towards the Royal Rumble. But I'm okay with it not happening right now. Mainly because you do want to give Roman the shine. This is a huge audience. This part of the feud is over. The Bloodline Civil War is done. Now, Roman gets to bask in his victory. But it's going to be short-lived, of course. He gets tonight. But there's going to be some kind of repercussions for this stuff later on. It kind of has to be. That's kind of how stories work, right? I will say, The Rock being the guy to give Roman the Ulafala, it does cap off, I guess you could say, the subtle storyline that happened in 2015 when The Rock was there to lift Roman's hand. This is the second time The Rock has acknowledged Roman, and, well, more than the second time, probably the third or fourth at this point, that he's tried to help Roman throughout his career. I'm sure these things will come up when their eventual feud occurs, whenever it occurs. All right, so there was a couple of New Day segments. New Day was featured all over this show because their match got pulled. They were supposed to wrestle in a tag match tonight against Rey Mysterio and a partner. That match, not only was it pulled, but it was seemingly just absolutely shredded in general, because later in the show, Chad Gable comes out and starts talking randomly about his struggles with luchadors. I'm like, who the hell ever said he struggles with luchadors? Where did that come from? And he said he wants to fight the best luchador. So he's probably going to end up fighting Penta next week. Okay, fine. But New Day was supposed to wrestle against Rey Mysterio and a partner tonight. And that match got pulled. So then, allegedly, well, I saw it on Twitter, during the commercials, that New Day actually cut a promo where they were going off on Kendrick Lamar and talking about Drake and all this kind of stuff. Then they also kind of hassled the Hispanic comedian that they were talking to. I don't care what that guy's name is. It don't matter. I never really liked the Hispanic comedians anyway. Sorry. But so they just popped up just to get the heat. It was no big deal. In terms of Ray, he showed up with a Eddie Guerrero shirt that really lit the internet on fire. That was great. That was truly tremendous. I like that. But the New Day, they were just there. So, okay. John Cena shows up, and the energy for the show goes up a lot because John Cena is there. He does a lot of the same stuff that The Rock did. Came out thanking Netflix, talked to the crowd about what all of this means. But then we get a nice little history lesson about John Cena in Los Angeles. He said this is going to be the last time he's going to be in Los Angeles or something. Talked about his time in UPW, which was a deep cut. For those of you who don't know, I did a video on the developmental territories. Well, it was technically not a developmental territory. It was technically a recruitment center. And this guy by the name of Rick Bassman, who was the individual who actually found Sting in the Ultimate Warrior. He used to run a wrestling school where he would, pretty much bring in bodybuilders and people like that in Southern California, and he would train them, and then he'd ship them off to WWE or WCW or whatever. Very famous for finding like Melina and Samoa Joe and a couple of other people too, but most famously Sting, Ultimate Warrior, and John Cena were found by Rick Bassman. They didn't say the name Rick Bassman, of course, because Cena hates Rick Bassman. Hates him because he signed a management contract with Rick Bassman, which led him to getting a piece of John Cena's developmental contract, and they had to do some legalese to get out of that thing. So Cornette will probably talk about that, or he probably did talk about it, because he was involved with that. But he talked about California, Los Angeles being the place that the prototype was born. This is where he won his first world title. This is WrestleMania 21 when he beat JBL. And he thanked Los Angeles. Then he started tossing out some names for his final match. He says that, and people are wondering whether he becomes the 17-time world champion. He breaks the record. Says that he doesn't see it happening. It's never going to happen because he hasn't won a match in 2,000 days. And said, my time is up. Their time is now. And so it won't happen. And then the crowd was very disappointed. People were grumbling at this point. They were like, what the hell are you doing out here, Dan? Then he says, It would take a miracle for something like that to happen. You can't just walk into a championship match. You'd have to do something like winning Money in the Bank, win the Elimination Chamber, and everybody starts to cheer because he's like, you have to win the Royal Rumble. And then he kind of goes into winning the Royal Rumble. That's what he's going to do. He's going to win number 17 because he's going to win the Royal Rumble. And everybody was happy with that. I think that was solid. It was pretty solid. I like the history lesson. I'm okay with nobody coming out there to face him. I would have preferred for somebody to come out there and get in his face, especially after he mentions that he wants to win the Royal Rumble. Somebody probably should have gotten in his face at that point, because you want to build something, right? You want to give people a breadcrumb or something to get people who might not want to watch next week to continue watching. Now, if I understand that Cena might not be on the show next week, I get that. But this other guy that you could have had Cena interact with probably will. And maybe that guy just gets in Cena's face, doesn't really touch him, doesn't beat him up or anything. But he sparks something that could be a feud for the Royal Rumble. And maybe a feud in the body of the Royal Rumble match. But something that people can be like, oh, who is this guy? Or this guy's getting in Cena's face. What's happening here? Is this guy going to be the guy that's going to try to stop number 17? And I think a Logan Paul would have been perfect for something like this, where they didn't need to touch each other. He could have just yelled it from the crowd in the microphone or whatever, and says, "You're not going to win the Royal Rumble because I'm going to win it," or whatever. And then he's going to do his address next week, and he's going to trash talk John Cena and how John Cena is washed and all that kind of stuff. And so then Cena can have something to return to, and not just show back up, run to the ring, and then talk about his final time in Muskogee or whatever, right? That's what I mean by planting some seeds. They didn't plant any seeds here. They just told everybody John Cena was going to be in the Royal Rumble, which is fine. But the Royal Rumble is in February. You have another show next week, And I was told that Cena was working regularly when he came back. Now, does regularly mean every week? Every other week? Is he going to be on SmackDown too? We don't know. But this was fine. I didn't hate this. Speaking of Logan Paul, there was a video package where Logan Paul says that he's 100% a WWE superstar now, which I think is a joke. But I'm interested in seeing his level of dedication to being 100% a WWE superstar. All right, so we get the second match on the show, which was, about an hour and a half in, I think. Liv Morgan loses the women's world title to Rhea Ripley, and probably one of the most anticlimactic matches in the history of the business. Now, one of the issues with this story was that Rhea Ripley was a heel who turned on Liv Morgan, and then somehow Liv Morgan ended up being the heel at the end, in the midst of all this. Well, Michael Cole tried to clear that up by basically blaming Edge. That, Edge he had manipulated Rhea Ripley and he corrupted her. And this led to her turning on her friends like Liv Morgan. But now she's over that. She's moved past it. She's worked through that trauma of being a young talent and not feeling properly adequate or whatever. So he tried to save it. And it was decent. It was decent. It was like, yeah, she was a bitch, but that was then. This is now. Now Liv's a bitch, Now, the match itself wasn't much. It was just okay. Rhea Ripley powerbombed Liv Morgan on the desk, just physically dominated her through most of the match, and then won with 2 riptides back to back. Just pretty much boot to ass with this whole thing. Yes, Liv had some substantial amount of offense, but nothing that made me believe that she was going to win the match, which is very important to me. You have to convince me that, especially in a match where I'm sure of the outcome, You have to convince me that the other person can win. Or you have to beat them in such a spectacular fashion that I'm like, whoa, blown away by it. Because Brock is perfect for that. He is the best at that. You know, you go watch Brock and you watch him versus Daniel Bryan or AJ Styles or Ricochet or Finn Balor, and you know he's not losing those matches. But his ability to throw guys around, you know, to muscle them around is entertaining. And you say like they're fighting such a massive force that of course they're going to lose. But they show tremendous amounts of fire and ability in doing so. That wasn't here because Liv Morgan's a chicken shit, very small heel. So it is what it is, right? So Liv Morgan loses, big whoop. You know, not really much of a surprise here. We get Dominic Mysterio kicked in the balls. He gets a riptide too after he tries to give Rhea Ripley a hug after she won the title. They tried to play that Dominic is a gold digger. He's just trying to hang out with whoever the world champion is. And that's fine, but of course we're going to ask the question, how does this play into his angle with Liv now? Because now Liv's not the champion anymore. Dom is seemingly snaking on Liv now. Like, how is that going to play out? But we'll see, I guess. I don't know if they thought that far ahead. But ultimately, they needed to get Rhea away from Liv. Liv lost. Theoretically, Liv is owed a rematch because she was the champion and she just lost the belt. And losing in the middle of the ring, clean, I mean, it's as definitive as it gets. But you would think she had beaten Rhea Ripley before, that they would have some kind of big rubber match. And maybe they still will. I don't want to put that in the universe. I'm just saying that typical booking would say that there needs to be at least one more match so that Liv can get a rematch, lose, and then that's it. So as Rhea Ripley is celebrating, Undertaker's theme song plays. And, you know, you hear the gong, and everybody goes up for the gong. And then the biker music starts to play, and everybody goes, oh. Every single time. They do it every time. I don't know why they keep asking Undertaker to come out there with the motorcycle. We all love Undertaker, but this ain't what people want to see. People want to see the dead man. And they're disappointed. Every time he is not the dead man, they're disappointed. Even though he said he's not doing it again. He can't do it again. You know, the character's gone. But people still expect that when he comes out. They still expect the dead man. He's not going to give it to them. What he did give them, however, was he came out, he rode, not really even rode the mic, he kind of walked it. And you know how I feel about walking motorcycles. He kind of walked the motorcycle around the ring, gave Rhea Ripley a dap, and that was kind of it. Which I was like, that was pointless. What a pointless. It was a nice cameo. He didn't get physical, nothing happened. But he gave Rhea Ripley the rub. So I guess that's fine. Rhea got to be the only person under the age of 35 to get a rub on this show. You know, to really get much face time on this program. Which is fine. I mean, it's cool. Bianca Belair, they showed her, she was sitting in the crowd. Despite the fact that she's, again, one of the faces of this thing, they got the Netflix avatars that you could pick for your Netflix account. She is one of the options, Bianca Belair. She's not featured on the show. She's sitting in the crowd like a jabroni. She's sitting in the crowd like LA Knight. She's sitting in the crowd like Nikki Bella. You know, like Michelle McCool. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. She's one of the top stars in the company. She's sitting in the crowd. But I mentioned her, not just to complain about the lack of push for Bianca Belair, but also to note that she was wearing gold teeth. And she had a couple of golds at the top. And I was like, that girl is from Tennessee. Because that's some real Tennessee country shit right there. Adam Pearce was talking to Bayley. I already mentioned about this whole thing with him and Chad Gable. The Rock teased going to NXT, and he said he's going to NXT tomorrow. And I was thrilled. I'm thrilled about that. You know, The Rock on NXT. Huh. NXT New Year's Evil. Huh. This is going to be fun. I don't care what he does. I just want to see it. It's going to be a clearly a cheap pop for the crowd. Clearly a cheap pop for ratings. But I'm down with it because I want to see what he's going to do. How he might not do much of anything except just go check up on his daughter and maybe ask her why she's calling herself Ava. All right, third match on the show: Jey Uso versus Drew McIntyre. I always talked about Travis Scott smoking weed, which is the most interesting thing about all of this. The match itself was fine. It was okay. Jey Uso actually kicked out of one of the Claymores, which raised my eyebrow because I wasn't expecting that. McIntyre was physically imposing. He beat up Jey. Jey is he flopped. You know, just was so beat up he couldn't continue. Very Bret Hart-ish here. McIntyre was mocking him, demanding that he gets up. He tries to go for a Claymore again. He gets countered into a crucifix. And he is pinned 1, 2, 3. Jey Uso has pinned Drew McIntyre. And then he got out of there. He stole one and then bounced. I'm not sure how I feel about this. This was the weakest match on the show. Well, maybe the women's match wasn't that strong either. But I think it did what it was supposed to do. You know, it showed that Jey can't stand toe to toe with Drew, but he had tactics on his side. So, but this match felt like one of the more unnecessary things to occur on the show, if we're being honest. Okay, Tiffany Stratton got a huge pop when she showed up, and that was nice to see. She got a huge pop too, much bigger pop than Braun Breaker got. And then we got Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan gets absolutely humiliated, booed out of the state of California. There's a lot of different things going on here. There was a story that popped up a couple hours before Raw, where Stone Cold Steve Austin was supposed to be making an appearance on this show. And Steve Austin was like, nah, I'm good. Let's go ahead and hang out with my cats. And decided not to show up. And Hulk Hogan was going to be there. Then they announced that Hulk Hogan and Real American Beer is minority owned by WWE. So they bought into Hulk Hogan's beer company. And now he's going to be everywhere. The beer company is on the mat. Hogan's going to be making appearances. He made an appearance here. He's in the commercial for the next Saturday night's main event. So that means he might be at that show too. And these people hate him. Now, I must understand. You must understand. This is California. All right? I think this is very context specific. But I want to just double back a little bit. I'm going to ask the question, just a little conspiracy that, you know, you don't have to take it or leave it. But WWE investing in Hulk Hogan's beer company, do you think that might have rubbed Stone Cold Steve Austin the wrong way? Because you know Stone Cold Steve Austin also sells beer. He has the Broken Skull beer, right? So they're competitors in the beer market. But WWE has given ad space to Hulk Hogan and apparently bought into his company. You know, and Stone Cold Steve Austin's beer is not even available around you can't get it in Michigan. Well, I looked. I don't drink beer, but I looked. Okay. So I'm thinking these things might be related. Because Steve Austin, you know, saw this whole thing with Hulk Hogan and said, like, you guys are helping him, you know, and you're not helping me. Shit, why should I show up? You know, to help the competition sell more beer. You know, fuck that. You know, or whatever. So Hulk Hogan's reaction, he gets booed. It was a mixed reaction at first, and the boo birds were very dedicated. So once people stopped cheering, the boos became deafening. And he came out there and he talked about great partnerships. He name dropped Randy Savage and Andre the Giant. He just got booed. They were booing Randy Savage and Andre the Giant because they hated Hulk Hogan that much. They booed WWE and they booed Netflix partnership. They booed all of this. Jimmy Hart, to his credit, stayed in the dark and just kept waving the flag. That's all he had to do, brother. He just stayed in the dark and kept waving the flag. He's getting paid. I think this is very context specific. California is the most liberal state in the union. If you think this has anything to do with racism, I don't think so. I think this has a whole lot to do with Hulk Hogan getting a whole lot of the blame for Donald Trump being in office. Now, you may say that's ridiculous. I'm telling you. People who are looking for reasons why Kamala Harris lost, one of the things that they blamed is Hulk Hogan. All right. Yes, you may say, well, the racism is probably a big issue. He's made appearances since the racism, and it's always been mixed. Don't get me wrong. It's always been mixed, but it has never been this negative. And I think a lot of that has to do with him being in the communist state of California. Now, he probably would have gotten booed in New York. Will he have gotten booed in Atlanta? Maybe. Probably. Would he gotten booed in Washington, D.C.? Probably. You know? In some of these big cities, more than likely Hulk Hogan is going to get booed. And I think a lot of that has to do with the political stuff. Now, the racism stuff is just distasteful. You know? But he got humiliated. And that made a lot of people on the internet very happy that the WWE audience, which this is not a typical WWE audience, by the way. These are multimillionaires in Los Angeles, are booing Hulk Hogan. Now, not everybody in the building was a multimillionaire, obviously, but you have a lot of disposable income if you went to a wrestling show in Los Angeles in 2025, all right? You have a lot of money. You have a lot of disposable income, because I'm pretty sure those tickets were not cheap. And I didn't look, but I heard those were some of the most expensive tickets outside of like a WrestleMania or a Big Four pay-per-view. And these were pretty fucking expensive tickets. And Hulk Hogan was just not welcome. Now, when it comes to utilizing Hulk Hogan, I think commercials is probably the best way to go. I don't think him being in front of a live audience is really going to work. I just don't think that he's welcome. And when you're saying that we're going to go to a new era, Hulk Hogan is one of those guys that probably he doesn't fit. They're done with him. And there's a lot of fans who are just done with him. And there's a lot of other fans who just don't care about him. You know, trying to turn him into WWE's mascot, well, it would have worked in, 2010, but it's not going to work today. It might have worked in 2008. It ain't going to work today. It's just a different world. So I'm not surprised at all at the reaction. I am mostly surprised that they put him out there live and didn't put him in a backstage segment where they could have muted some of the boos and tried to control it. But I think if Triple H knows what's best for him, I think if Nick Khan is smart, and these people are not stupid, you don't get too many more of these Hulk Hogan live appearances. You send him to places where he can shill his beer, and maybe some folks will try to, I think he's been getting trolled at personal appearances and stuff like that. The guy's 60, 70 some odd years old. I mean, grow up. Whatever. He got to get right with God. That's just pretty much what it is when it comes to the Hulkster. Right? He's still on the wrong side of so many people. And even if it wasn't for the MAGA shit and the racism, it's the lies, the regular Hulk Hogan bullshit. When you have a guy like just a couple of weeks ago, you had Jesse Ventura, who was going on tour for WWE to promote Saturday Night's Main Event, running Hulk Hogan through the mud. This can't work. You can't have Jesse Ventura running Hulk Hogan through the mud for a shoot, by the way, and then have Hulk Hogan in the commercials for Saturday Night's Main Event. Because Jesse is working those shows, and Hulk is doing a commercial for those shows? No. These guys... Jesse does not want to get along with Hulk. He's going to bury him whenever he gets a chance to. And Hulk is already in the hole. So Jesse's just going to dig the hole deeper. This is not going to work. All right? It's not going to work. You might have to just move on from Hulk Hogan. He's done a lot of things that has eroded the love for Hulk Hogan. And it's unfortunate. Now, maybe when he's gone, you could do more, but not right now. And it's definitely a terrible thing that they decided to cut ties with the Ultimate Warrior, because now you can't use him either. And Randy Savage didn't have any kids, so you can't do anything with him. I think his parents are dead. His wife might still be alive, but you can't really use Randy Savage either. I think Andre got a daughter. Maybe you can find Andre the Giant's daughter or something, Roddy Piper's kids or something to help be mascots for the company at this point. But all of your legends are pretty much gone. Either they're like guys like Jake Roberts work for AEW. Roddy Piper is dead. Shawn already works there. He works in NXT. Brett, it's unpredictable. Undertaker is not your pitch guy. He's not your mascot. He's the most notable character that you have, but he's not your mascot. Triple H is trying. He's trying to be Vince. So this is not going to work because you can't use Vince, so you have to use Triple H. And The Rock is trying to take other parts of this thing. And Steve Austin doesn't want to be around. Somebody mentioned that Stone Cold Steve Austin have not made one single appearance since Vince left. Not one. And that's a major, major issue. Because, again, you're talking about a company with so much history that they trade on their history quite a bit. And if you weren't paying The Rock, he probably wouldn't be there either. So the only person who's really loyal to the company and willing to show up is Undertaker. John Cena's on his way out. Edge is already gone. Randy is still wrestling, but, is Randy really going to be your mascot? No. So the rest of his guys are either on the bad side of the liberals, dead, or they're part of the unmentionables. Okay? So what are you going to do? You're going to have to build new stars, build a new legacy. Hope John Cena doesn't fuck up at some point, so that you can continue to use John Cena as the mascot, because he works. People don't hate John Cena enough. The stuff about Taiwan was distasteful. They didn't like that. But nobody hates John Cena over it. They're kind of disappointed in him. Same thing with him wearing a dress. They're disappointed in John Cena, but they don't hate him. They hate Hulk Hogan. Right? You're not going to have anybody that you're going to bring into the company that's going to be shoveling shit on John Cena. So you probably need to start phasing Hogan out and bringing Cena in as a sort of the company mascot. And everything from the Vince era is probably going to have to be excised to a degree. So I'm always surprised when I see WWE trying to trade on their history and be very, very selective, where it's all Triple H clips, Stone Cold Steve Austin clips, Undertaker clips, Shawn Michaels clips. And it's like, okay, you're trying to avoid showing Edge. You're trying to avoid Jericho. And, you can't show Benoit. Maybe you throw an Eddie Guerrero in there. You throw a Shawn Michaels in there. But they also don't really acknowledge Bruno and Backlund. And you can't acknowledge Superfly. They keep forgetting Mick Foley still exists. He might be a good mascot for you. Nobody hates Mick Foley. But Triple H and all of them are Trump supporters. And Foley doesn't like Trump supporters. So he might not want to help the company. What do you do? What do you do when you're a company that trades on their history to such a degree, and now you've tainted the history? It's almost like the Disney thing is perfect. You know, how people destroyed the legacy of Walt Disney. They didn't destroy his company, they destroyed his name. So Disney is basically a company that exists outside of Walt Disney now. Everything that Walt Disney believed in is completely detached from Disney as a company that exists right now. And in a few years, WWE will be the exact same way. All the stuff that created WrestleMania, that built and the big merchandise and marketing machine, Saturday Night's Main Event, Monday Night Raw, all that stuff is going to be detached from WWE due to the fact that it's going to be Vince McMahon. Regardless of how this stuff comes out. At least until he goes into the ground. Maybe Vince will die and enough people will, maybe enough time will pass where they're going to be able to integrate that stuff back in. Remember, they did the same thing to Henry Ford too. You know, when Henry Ford nowadays, his name is on hospitals, his name is on museums. But if you talk to people about Henry Ford and about how great he was, the first thing you'll hear is, wasn't he an anti-Semite? Didn't he hate Jews? That's how this kind of, it's sort of destruction where they can take what you created away from you and give you no credit for it. You know, you're just an anti-Semite, you're just a rapist, you're just a whatever. And then they move on and destroy and rebuild your life's work. And Vince McMahon sold the company before he left, so he pretty much did it to himself. But now he's going to be erased. He's going to get close to Benoit at this point, at least until he's in the ground. And now you're going to have to start looking at individual talent from that era that's going to be exiled. And Hogan is probably going to be number one with a fucking bullet. And there's a lot of people who have weird feelings about the Ultimate Warrior too. So you're not going to be able to use him. Right? There's going to be a lot of people like, Ultimate Warrior? Wasn't he a homophobe? They did 2 different Dark Side of the Ring episodes on him. You know, talking about him being a homophobe. And Superfly Snuka allegedly murdered somebody. So you're going to have a lot of interesting times here, especially if certain people get control of who gets to be a star and what history counts. So WWE as a company with so much history, they're going to go through it eventually what Disney has gone through, if they haven't already done it. All right, so I did a lot of talking, and we finally started getting to the main event. CM Punk defeats Seth Rollins. The match was pretty good. I didn't like the finish, though, but the match was pretty good. Physical, these guys were throwing hands. Punk, I think, got hurt in this match. He seemed like he might have gotten a concussion or hurt his foot or something or other. The guy's very injury prone, but we'll talk about that in a second. Anyway, Seth Rollins wanted to be a little bit more violent, and the referee threatened to disqualify him. He's telling, let it ride. And the referee was like, don't put me in that situation, no. And then they went outside in the ring and fought for 3 minutes. Very odd decision stuff. Is so stupid. They did a top rope net breaker, where CM Punk did a top rope net breaker to Seth Rollins, and they went to commercial. So you get hit with a big move, and we don't even get to see whether you go for a pinfall or not. You just go to commercial. Anyway, Seth Rollins hits a GTS, but CM Punk rolled out of the ring. He hit a second one a little bit later, but CM Punk kicked out. Seth Rollins is pointing to all of this, the barricades and the rings and everything, talking about how he built all of this, and to CM Punk. Very upset that Punk left. CM Punk ended up hitting a stomp to Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins kicked out at 2. Seth Rollins starts screaming at Punk that he ain't got nowhere to run this time. He ain't got nowhere to go. Gives him a pedigree on the desk. Throws him in the ring. Gives him a second pedigree. CM Punk kicks out of that. Okay. Now, under normal circumstances, I would probably bitch about, kicking out of 2 pedigrees, but the pedigree is not really, it ain't shit. Okay. Plus, there was enough time, I think, to kick out. So there was a buckle bomb that was countered from the running knee. So CM Punk, of course, does this running knee. Rollins caught him, ran across the ring, buckle bomb. They're showing that they know each other's moves, right? That they're very aware of each other's move sets, and that they have counters of each other's moves. And this actually plays very well into the finish. Seth Rollins kind of fires up, and he goes up there. He's going to do his superplex into the Falcon Arrow spot. So he does the superplex. He goes to pick Punk up, but Punk counters it into the GTS. The crowd goes nuts. That should have been the pin. Instead, we get Rollins on wobbly legs like some character out of Mike Tyson Punch-Out, and then he falls onto CM Punk's shoulders to take another GTS. I'm like, get the fuck. So, at that point, the second GTS finishes it. CM Punk defeats Seth Rollins clean in the middle of the ring, and there was no afterbirth. It just went off the air. And that was disappointing. That was very disappointing. And the one thing, I think, to tie this all together, I'm not done, but there's one thing to tie this all together, is when I started this, I said that something was missing. And what's missing is the unpredictability. There's a certain level of magic that was in the WWE product that all of the dweebs online hate, but that are memorable, that the casual fans got themselves into, or at least things that were lighthearted and fun. This show was very workmanlike, where it was very self-congratulatory, where everybody was out there celebrating all the money they're going to make and all the money the people spent. But there was not enough, I think, celebrating the talent, showcasing the talent, and there were no angles. There were no angles on this show. I've seen people say it was like a house show. I've seen people say it was like a pay-per-view, one of Triple H's pay-per-views, where there's no angles. You just deliver what you promised, and then that's it. Right? We promised you this great main event. We're just going to do this match, and then that's it. We didn't promise you anything more than that, so we're not going to do anything more than that. And I think that that's wrong. I think that's the wrong way to do things. You have to over-deliver. That's how fans are made at this point. You tell these fans, hey, this is what we're going to do, and that's how you get people into the building, and then you give them something extra. You give them more than what they bargained for. That's what the promos are about. That's what the hype is all about. Giving people more than what they asked for. And I think Triple H is too fucking conservative. Right? He wants to do real meat and potatoes. Here's the match. We're gonna have, some shenanigans with the extra players and all this kind of stuff. Every match has run-ins, except the main event. But there's no moment. There's nothing that walked away from you when you walked away from this show that was like, man, I need to watch this show next week. Other than it was very pretty. I like the effects that they did in the sky. That's it. Oh, it was a very pretty product. Okay, thanks. But, did you like the matches? Well, the matches were okay. They weren't terrible, but none of them blew you away. There's a bunch of graybeards out there. How many guys came out there with gray in their hair and gray in their beard? Quite a few, actually. The positive energy remained all night because the people were just happy to be there and it was a huge moment, but they were still expecting things. Even late into the show, they were still expecting something to happen because that's what they're used to. The WWE audience is used to when there's something big on the horizon, there's something unpredictable that's going to happen. There were no debuts. There were no returns. There were no big angles. There was no blood. There was no testing of the limb. They were even still muting cuss words. So what changed? The platform. The platform changed. That was it. Virtually nothing changed. And when you take that into account, you can say this was a very disappointing episode of Monday Night Raw. One of the most disappointing ever. Because we were told, or we were led to believe, oh, they're not going to do any angles on Saturday night's main event because they got the Netflix Raw coming up. Oh, they're not going to do any angles on Raw. They got the Netflix Raw coming up. Oh, they're not going to do anything on SmackDown because the Netflix Raw is coming up. And now the Netflix Raw is here, and they still haven't done shit. So the idea is, it's not because they were saving it. It's because they don't want to do anything. They think what they're doing is good enough. This is good enough. We promised you Rhea Ripley versus Liv Morgan. We're going to give you Rhea Ripley as the champion. That's it. That's all you needed to know. We promised you Roman Reigns versus Solo Sikoa. We delivered that match. Roman Reigns won. That's all we promised you. Is a winner and a loser. We didn't promise you any angles. We didn't promise you any teases or anything like that. So we're not going to give you any of that. Wow, that was the magic of WWE. Is you never know what's going to happen. And that's not something you want people to get used to. Because that makes your show skippable. It turns your show into AEW. Right? We're gonna lay. I mean, look at what they set for next week. When you see the card for next week, Damian Priest versus Finn Balor is on that show. The Women's Intercontinental Championship is on that show. They're still not focusing on Braun Breaker. Gunther was not on this show. They had a vignette for him, but that was probably during a commercial break. They're not setting up anything for him. Sheamus is versus wrestling Ludwig Kaiser on the show. Does that sound like a show that you absolutely positively need to watch next week? No. Now that might be a show where something might actually happen. Because it needs it. It's a show that needs some oomph. So they're promising you there's going to be the world's best luchador next week. It'll probably be Penta. So you're going to have at least a debut. Whoopee. Thanks. Instead of starting out with a bang and, trying to maintain this, you're just going to say, oh, we built up the hype, and then we delivered a little bit, and now we move on. I don't like this. I'm not a fan. I'm very, very, very underwhelmed. I'm very underwhelmed. This is more disappointing than the return of Saturday night's main event. Because at the very least, the excuse for Saturday night's main event was that there was going to be Netflix Raw. And they're going to do something for Netflix Raw. Well, this is a Netflix Raw show. They didn't do anything. So that tells me that Triple H has no imagination. There's no magic in his heart. This is going to be a very meat and potatoes, boring, skippable show. That's why I didn't want to pay for Netflix. If I didn't already have it, I wasn't going to pay for it. Because this is what, maybe the first show, I'm trying to throw some pleas here, cop some pleas. Maybe the first 2 or 3 shows, you just wait and see what's going to happen. But I think, months of, he already botched Saturday night's main event reboot. He's already botched the go home show for Raw. on USA to sell this show. He already botched that. He botched this show. All right. What? How many more fuck ups can we let him get away with and say, oh, it's going to be next time. Oh, it's going to be next time. It's not going to be next time. It's just, I don't know what we're waiting for, but whoever was in charge of running the creative during the road to WrestleMania last year was cooking. Whoever that was. It was probably Paul and The Rock. All right? But Triple H is just, he's a carpenter. He wants to make everything. He's going to measure it, and measure twice, cut once, and then that's it. Well, Vince was an artist. He's going to throw some shit at the wall. It might come out pretty. It might come out messy. We don't know. But at least it was going to be an interesting show to a degree. You might hate something. You might hate something so much that you talk about it 5 years later, like the dog food segment. But you might love something so much that you talk about it 5 or 6 years later, like the Planet's champion Daniel Bryan with his vegan-friendly title. When you don't take chances at all, then you don't get any of that. You don't get the best or the worst. You just get bland. And Triple H's WWE is very, very bland. This was a very bland episode of Raw. It just happened to be on a bigger platform, and it was very pretty. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.